Welcome to a scary edition of Drugs, Crimes, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. I'm your host for this special Halloween edition, Buford Terrell, and I'm here with my co-host,
Bindu Nair.
Good evening. And before we get into the show, we have a message from a special spokesman tonight, so let's see what he has to say for us.
I am the spirit of drug war. I want to devour your life. I want to eat your children. I want to kick in your door. I want to take your home, your cash, your car, your worldly goods. I want to send you to prison for years, if not decades, with sadistic criminals and guards. And when you're released, I want to forbid you from housing, credit, and education, or even a driver's license. And I do all this to stop your suffering.
Well, thank you. There's some thoughts to ponder.
That was pretty scary.
Yeah.
You know, Halloween is a scary time, but it's true. The drug war is even scarier. By how much we're spending on it, how little we're accomplishing it, and how long it's going to go on and continue from here.
Well, do you have some facts and figures on that?
I've got a couple of facts and figures. Usually I have some facts and figures about medical marijuana, but I just wanted to let all of our guests know that this is our season premiere, and 2 weeks from now we will have an excellent guest about medical marijuana and specifically what's happening on marijuana reform in Texas. So, but tonight, a new statistic that came out. You know, we all talk about, decriminalization in the U.S., what's been going on with it. California, since Prop 215 passed, there's been numerous studies that have shown that there has been a decrease in marijuana use from, in adolescent age children and adolescent age up to 20s. There's been a decrease since Prop 215 passed, and that's medical marijuana legislation. So, maybe that was a fluke or not, who knows, but a study just came out that in the UK, where they're also having so much troubles with, they decriminalized it, now they're trying to recriminalize it, and they don't know what they're doing. They are just kind of in a flux right there. They don't know what's going on, but the numbers speak no lies. From 2003 to 2004 is when marijuana was first decriminalized. Marijuana use in the age population of 19 to 24-year-olds dropped from 25 to 20%. Now in 2007, the actual use in that age range is now 8%, with the age range of 25 to 59-year-olds mirroring that at 8%. So this is proof positive that not just in the U.S., but all over the world, once you decriminalize, that doesn't mean that everyone's going to run out of their houses and go buy as much drugs as they can just because it's legal. We're not going to have all of a sudden a population of people just running out and trying to buy drugs. They're sending a clear message that this is not a harmful substance. This is not as harmful as we thought. In fact, in the UK, so many studies have come out to reclassify it as not such a highly scheduled drug. The U.S., we haven't followed suit. We're having, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. It's still a Schedule 1 drug.
Well, we've now been joined by Dean Becker of widespread radio fame. Glad to have you with us.
Good to be here, Buford.
Before we get into what Dean's brought us tonight, a couple of comments I'd like to make. With your talking about the use levels, as a lot of people know, my interest is as much in all kinds of prohibition laws in general as it is the drug laws. And for that reason, there was, to me, a very interesting study that just came out in which a group looked at abortions worldwide. And after all, anti-abortion laws are another form of prohibition. And what this study, looking all around the world at all kinds of population, found was that the number of abortions decreased with education and especially with the availability of contraception, and that the existence of laws against it didn't affect the level of occurrence at all. It merely meant that more abortions in places where it was illegal were bad abortions and caused severe damage to the women undergoing them. And I think the history of the drug laws show the same thing. I mean, no one can tell me with a straight face that the level of marijuana use today is lower than it was in 1937. No one can tell me that the level of heroin use is lower today than it was in 1914. So anyway, do you have any comments on this, Dean?
Well, I agree 100% with that thought, that with every step we have taken to prevent the use of drugs, we have, in effect, encouraged the use of drugs by creating the black market, the rebellion, just the situation where children do it to show that they're not going to be kowtowed, if you will, that they're going to do whatever they damn well please.
Yeah. Now, one thing I have noticed lately is that there seems to be another group of movements around the country right now, in Wisconsin, in Denver, and several other places, where local governments that really face the problem of paying for all of the marijuana arrests through local initiatives are starting to revolt against enforcing the state and federal drug laws.
And we have just the opposite here in Texas and in counties like Harris, where the district attorneys say, if I can't arrest people, well, I'm not even going to charge them, almost as a temper tantrum.
Well, I wouldn't say almost. I would say it is a temper tantrum.
Yes.
And I think next year in the general elections that the district attorney's slot is one that people should look at very carefully before they decide who to vote for.
Well, sure, you only have to look at the crime lab scandal, the ongoing series of murders in police custody that are hardly ever resolved,
right?
And just the lack of oversight of what he's supposed to be overseeing.
Does the DA have anything to do with prison overcrowding problems that Houston is having right now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who do you think puts them all in?
Yeah, that House Bill 2391 says he no longer has to arrest or incarcerate anybody for crimes of basically less than $500 or for 4 ounces or less of marijuana. And he refuses to do that.
Well,
he wants to send more people to Louisiana.
The problem is 2391 is not self-executing.
Right.
It requires either the city government or the county government to go to the administrative district court judge to work out a plan for how it will be carried out. The problem is Rosenthal has raised so much stink about it that neither the city government nor the county government has been willing to move forward.
Right.
And really it's ridiculous. Right now, the county's talking about a bond issue to spend $200 million building more jails.
Right.
At the same time, they've stayed in constant trouble with the state accrediting agencies because they don't have enough staffing for the jails they've got now. And every one of those new additional jail cells that they build will require additional staffing to oversee it, and that has to be paid for on an ongoing basis out of tax money. The city is desperately trying to get more cops on the street. And from numbers we've looked at before, every 4 marijuana arrests that are replaced with citations amounts to 1 more full-time patrolman on the streets.
Right.
So that's an easy way to build up the size of the effective police force.
I think it was the district attorney of Franklin County, if I remember right. He was quoted by an article in the Houston Chronicle as saying, we can't stop arresting these people. What if they go on a murderous rampage if we don't send them to jail? That's a near exact quote. And that's the kind of mentality that is allowed to run this drug war.
And it seems like further and further as we're falling into the Reefer madness stage. In fact, we were going to watch that movie and comment on how out of tune that movie was. But hearing a comment like that, it sounds very that movie Reefer Madness.
Sure.
Well, it doesn't sound that out of tune.
Well, if
you follow the newspaper stories and hear, for instance, the hysteria going around right now about salvadivinorum, which is far from being a threatening drug.
Well, something I read that was really kind of funny to me, it was a blog about, the DEA and is coming out with, oh, well, the pot that's on the streets now is pot version 2.0. It's harder, it's, it's easier to attain, and it's, it does so much worse to you and everything. Well, so then on the off point, the person made the comment, well, if this is what we have, pot version 2.0, where's pot version 1.0, and why were we arresting so many people for it instead? It was so
The
harmless.
sad fact is most of the pot on the street corner is still 1.0.
It's
It's Mexican weed.
Could I share with you an
yeah.
experience? I was in Los Angeles about 3 weeks ago at the Normal Conference, and it was a gathering of people from around the country, and this is in a city where marijuana is legal. There are some 300 plus marijuana dispensaries. We were outside the Sheraton Universal, very first-class hotel in a very first-class area. People were smoking on the patio, the hydro, the high-grade stuff, the 2.0, and I think they were doing 3.0. This stuff called trichomes.
Yes.
And it's minuscule amounts are required to obtain the medicinal high, and throughout it all, hundreds of people using the very best products on the planet. There was no sickness, no illness, no injury, no mental faculties
rampages.
lost. It was a perfect example of proper usage.
On that, as far as the 2.0 is concerned, 3 quick comments, and then we have to go to the first of your film clips.
Well, good.
But first, even back in the 60s, to show my age, as far as the 2.0 stuff is concerned, it wasn't that hard to get 2-hit tie sticks.
Oh, yes.
I mean, the high-potency stuff is...
Oh, yeah. They make you see mandalas in the
yes.
trees.
The second point is that with the main ingestion route being smoking, a user smokes until he gets high and then stops. It's not like alcohol, where you drink it and find out 30 minutes later you're wasted.
Right.
So the high-power stuff simply means you take a strong hit and you quit.
Sure.
And I think the third and fourth things, it's possible to grow marijuana with THC content up to about 15% or so without too much trouble. But in the Netherlands, where it's been pretty much decriminalized, what they found was that the customers, and there they like stronger marijuana because they usually mix it with tobacco. The customers were rejecting the 15% stuff and were settling on a market level of about 8%, which is stronger than American smoke. And the fourth thing is, walk into any liquor store in the country, and you can find everything from beer at about 5% alcohol to rum at 151 proof, 75%, up to Everclear at about 85 or 90% alcohol. And consumers are sophisticated enough to know the difference. So the 2.0 is strictly hype. Anyway, I understand you had a guest in town last night.
Yes, Dr. Rick Doblin was in town to held kind of a fundraiser symposium, and he's head of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And I think we'll get more from Rick in this regard, but I got a chance to talk to him about Dr. Albert Hoffman. Gentleman's now 101, almost 102 years old, the inventor or discoverer.
I really didn't even know he was still alive.
Oh, yes, and
wow.
Doing quite well. And I had asked him if didn't that kind of belie the government thought that it's such a dangerous drug? And perhaps we have that ready?
We've got the first segment ready, so why don't we look at what Dr. Doblin had to say.
All right. Stan Wright, the inventor of LSD, you were just speaking about the forthcoming study, is it 101 years old? And if it were detrimental to one's health, I think he kind of belies that whole scenario, does he not?
Well, I wouldn't quite go so far as to say that, because there are people that have taken LSD that have had difficult experiences, and psychologically it's been harmful to them, and they've ended up worse off than before. But I thought a lot, actually, about Albert Hoffman and his longevity. He's still sharp. He's amazing. He's 101 and 3/4. He'll be 102 on January 11th. But the more that I've thought about it, I really think that I know the biggest part of the secret of his longevity, and that's love. His wife Anita is still alive. She's about 98 years old, and they've been together this whole time. So I think that more than anything probably has contributed to them both staying alive. But I also think that his experiences with LSD have inspired him, have connected him more to nature, have been very, very helpful in his zest for life, which has kept him alive. And the other thing that has been important, and perhaps it's been helping to keep him alive a little bit, is that we've been trying to resume LSD psychotherapy research. And he's written a book, LSD, My Problem Child, and he talks about trying to transform his problem child to his wonder child. There was a big conference in Basel for his 100th birthday, and at that conference I had actually been struggling to try to get LSD research approved so that that would be my 100th birthday present from the psychedelic community to Albert, that we'd been able to start LSD psychotherapy research, but that was not to be. It's taken a lot longer. I did promise, though, that we would try our best to have it for him by his 101st birthday. That came and went, and we were delayed in frustrating ways by the various regulatory processes we had to go through in Switzerland. And now, finally, it looks like we'll be able to present him with an approved LSD psychotherapy study for his 102nd birthday.
All right. We have...
This made me think of something funny, talking about Dr. Hoffman and LSD.
Yes.
101 years old. I'm of an age so that I grew up with the beatniks. And probably the three leading beatnik writers were Jack Kerouac of On the Road,
Sure.
Allen Ginsberg, the poet, and William Burroughs of Naked Lunch.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Kerouac was primarily an alcoholic and managed to drink himself to death at around age 45.
Mm.
Ginsberg never saw a psychedelic he didn't love. And he managed to stay alive and be productive into his 70s. And Burroughs was a heroin addict from the 1930s, continued using his whole life, and he was well into his 80s before he died.
Right.
So if you're worried about living a long time, I would say stay away from the booze and look at the other things.
It's so true, so true. Alcohol is the big killer. Well, tobacco first, but
Right, yeah.
between those two, 550,000 a year. It's hard to pin down how many die from the recreational drugs. The government hardly won't allow the stats out.
No, but what you
We do
can
know
get
more
is that it's in the neighborhood of thousands, not even tens of thousands.
Right. I've heard
And
3,500, 4,500.
Right.
And
Illicit drugs kill more people than illicit drugs.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, the doctors and pharmacists screwing up our prescriptions kill over 100,000 a year.
And there was a long story in the paper today about the totally unregulated shipping of chemicals from China to be incorporated in pharmaceuticals.
Right.
Oh my.
Some outright poisons.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to get into a segment about LSD.
Well, no, that was LSD. We're going to get into MDMA.
The other thing I wanted to say about the LSD is that it was only made illegal in 1968. And from the end of World War II in 1946 until 1968, Sandoz made it available either free or very cheaply to researchers and medical practitioners.
Right.
In that course of time, well over 5,000 medical articles were published in refereed journals about the use of LSD in psychotherapy. Tens of thousands of patients were treated with literally hundreds of thousands of doses of LSD. And the medical consensus was that in a lot of psychotherapy realms, including, ironically, most effectively in the treatment of alcoholism, that it was a very effective drug and an extremely safe drug. practically no deaths or long-term side effects resulted from its medical use at all.
Well, it was only with the stories about like Art Linkletter's daughter and a few other very sensational stories that this urban myth, this propaganda was allowed to demonize the product to where they made it illegal.
Actually, it was done intentionally. From 1946 through about 1960, both the Army and the CIA, under a series of programs called Mark Ultra, experimented with LSD either as a truth serum or as a terrorism weapon. One of their ideas was to slip LSD unknowingly to leaders of the other side to make them act crazy and lose their following. But these experiments, which couldn't be conducted by any ethical medical practitioner, involved giving LSD doses to people who didn't know about it at all. The CIA even hired and set a prostitute up in business in San Francisco, had her slip LSD dosages to her clients and film them. Now, some of these people who took LSD and didn't know they were taking it had very, very bad results. One of the very few fatalities was a guy that the CIA slipped LSD to. He tripped out, freaked out, and jumped out of a high-story hotel window and died.
Right.
But there were many, many more deaths through the CIA experiments than there were of all of the casual and medical use.
My first experience with LSD was in '67 when it was legal.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you, there was a whole lot more paranoia involved in its use in the following years when it became illegal. And gosh, not knowing that you're even taking it, I can't imagine how frightening that might be.
But when you figure, if you look at Ken Kesey's acid tests in California, where they would get stock tank size vats of Kool-Aid and add acid to it, open the place up and have thousands of people trip with no appreciable negative results at all. I mean, this is a pretty thoroughly tested drug from both a medical and a recreational standpoint.
But again, given Schedule I status, no redeeming value at this point. Yeah.
Has there been any medical uses for it whatsoever?
Well,
yes.
And Rick was saying that they just opened up a new, approved a new study in Switzerland to test LSD, for
but as I was saying, over 5,000 articles in refereed medical journals on its use in psychotherapy.
Right. There certainly have been plenty of studies. There's originally studies done on stock animals. This is what I thought you were going for.
No, this is in
measuring
actual
where
psychotherapy.
goats, actually giving goats acid and measuring their walking pattern and seeing how they're affected afterwards. So,
well, did you want to do the MDMA? Hear from Dr. Doblin on that?
Yeah. Well, I think we've got time to do the MDMA now before we take our break.
Okay.
So let's see what he has to say on this.
And is trying in different underhanded ways to misclassify people with pre-existing personality disorders so that they don't have to pay them disability for post-traumatic stress disorder. We have been able to start a study with MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder that's taking place in Charleston, South Carolina. We have a study for MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder in Switzerland that's treated a few patients, and we also have a study approved in Israel for MDMA for survivors of war and terrorism-related incidents with post-traumatic stress disorder. What we've been able to show so far in our pilot study, it's not completed, but what we've been able to show is that MDMA can help subjects who are what are known as treatment resistant. In order to be in our study, people have had to fail on finding relief from SSRI medications. Those are Zoloft and Paxil. Those are the only medications that are approved by the FDA for post-traumatic stress disorder. Prozac and others are part of that same class. So people have to have failed on SSRIs, and then also they have to have failed on non-drug psychotherapy of a certain limited number of kinds that have shown to be effective in post-traumatic stress disorder. So once we take these treatment failures and administer MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, we've been able to demonstrate in almost everybody, not in everybody, but in almost everybody, dramatic reductions in their symptoms for post-traumatic stress disorder. We have a control group. It's a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled study with blinded independent raters who were not previously involved with us and who were not previously involved with psychedelic research, doing the evaluations. This is a study that is going to be able to withstand whatever scrutiny comes from the scientific community and from the FDA. We are now, in the next month, screening the 20th subject out of 20. We have one vet in the study. We've had a lot of problems with getting vets into the study because various VAs around the country have been reluctant to refer subjects to our study. And at the same time, we've been able to find one. His treatment is going to be starting next month. And we have a second subject who we've had to actually go to the FDA to ask for an exception to see if we could enroll him. He'll be subject number 21, Marine, Ranger, Commander in Iraq with substantial PTSD. But the reason that we had to go to the FDA, and now today actually, the IRB is meeting to evaluate whether he can be in the study. He's not a treatment failure. But the reason he's not a treatment failure is because the military did not offer him treatment. He's been classified as depressive disorder. He was not offered individual psychotherapy. We've already done some preliminary screening on him. He has major post-traumatic stress disorder of a severe nature, among the most severe of anybody in our study. The FDA has said, yes, he can be in our study. The Institutional Review Board will let us know today. I believe that we are going to be able to show that if MDMA were available as a legal prescription medicine in association with psychotherapy for many of the vets coming back from Iraq, that we could help them avoid a lifetime of disability and a lifetime of suffering, and also save money of a massive proportion from the disability payments. Now, one of the subjects in the study was not a vet, but one of the subjects in the study said that she couldn't understand why this drug was called ecstasy. Because in a psychotherapeutic situation, the drug helps people to go deep into their feelings. And that can be very, very painful. And people work through the pain rather than avoid it. And it's really a combination of the MDMA and the psychotherapy, which can be expensive initially, but in the long run is much better off for everybody. The Washington Post Sunday Magazine is doing a cover story, 8,500-word story, on our MDMA PTSD study in the U.S. for November 25th, the weekend after Thanksgiving. And I think this is going to be introducing to many people in the Washington, D.C. area, in the Pentagon, in the halls of government, the potential that MDMA can offer to our vets coming back in a way that we owe them the most that we can do for them. Now, whether this potential will be something that the Veterans Administration will decide to help us support, I'm not sure. I'd be surprised, but we are going to have very strong pilot data. The study that we're currently doing will probably be completed in about 6 months or so, 6 to 8 months with all the subjects through it. We do a 1-year follow-up, and now we're looking at people after several years. The study has been going for a while. The gains seem to be lasting.
Back, it looks like it's about time for us to take a break. So let's do the break, and we'll come back and talk about the MDMA studies some, and then look at what Dr. Dublin has to say about marijuana. So we'll see you all in about a minute or so. Okay. He wants us to keep going a little while longer.
Buford, are we able to take calls tonight? It'd be great if some folks out there would give us a call. We'd appreciate your participation.
Yeah, and the number's up on the screen now. We're always happy to get your calls. Back in the 1980s, MDMA first started showing up on the club scene, really in the Dallas and Austin area.
True.
And when people started buying their MDMA pills at the clubs using credit cards, the DEA panicked. and scheduled an emergency rescheduling for MDMA. 275 doctors and psychotherapists filed written or oral testimony, all of them saying it was a crucial element of their psychotherapy. The DEA itself had no medical evidence whatsoever. Their only safety evidence was involved with two somewhat similar but very different drugs, MDE and MDA. They had absolutely no safety information on MDMA. That was the basis of the record that got MDMA, or ecstasy, placed in Schedule 1 as being highly abusive and with absolutely no medical use. I believe we've got a caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Isn't it true that the government introduced some drugs, created some drugs for mass production?
Okay. Has the government created drugs for mass?
Well, you were talking about the CIA distributing the LSD.
Yeah, I think the main one that I'm aware of is that in the 1970s, when medical marijuana users first started going to court, the DEA actually found a small generic drug manufacturer and paid them to develop Marinol, which is the synthetic THC drug, so that they could say, we don't need to legalize marijuana. People can take this artificial pure version instead.
Right.
And it's turned out to be an utter flop on the marketplace.
It works for some people. They're trying to develop other drugs like Sativex, which is having some. I think she was referring to the urban legend that acid was developed by the government.
No.
Yeah, and it's not.
And
that,
the other
and
thing
the
is
development by the government.
Yeah, the other urban legend is that the CIA developed crack and turned it loose in the Los Angeles ghetto, and there's no evidence for that at all.
Well, there's certainly indications that they did participate in the Iran-Contra affair, smuggling cocaine, up through Mena, Arkansas, and getting it into our communities.
Yeah.
They did that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But as for the theory that they invented crack, no.
Ooh.
Caller, call back. But for the Iran-Contras affair, there's an excellent article.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, I just want to ask one question.
Yes.
There's more people that die with alcohol accidents than cigarettes. I just wanted to know, would it be more beneficial to legalize weed for medical reasons?
Okay, thank you. Roughly, to look at the figures recently, and these are round numbers, about 400,000 people a year die from illnesses related to smoking.
Right.
About 150,000 a year die from illnesses directly related to the use of alcohol. About 16,000 a year die in alcohol-related traffic accidents. And we said earlier, there are absolutely no deaths related to the use of marijuana, even if we put together the opiates, cocaine, and the amphetamines. We're talking about the same number of deaths that we get each year from aspirin.
Right, aspirin and Tylenol, bigger killer, combining the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been duped. I mean, that's what I say on my show. We've been fed a bag of lies for so long, we just believe it. We lean into it like it's the West Texas wind.
The problem is it's been 90 years now, and nobody, from the president to the deans of medical schools down to the man on the street, has ever heard anything but this propaganda.
Right, and there's no end to the war on drugs. We talk about you decriminalize and we have less people using it, but nobody wants to. The government doesn't want those kind of statistics out. Nobody sees an end to the war on drugs, so we'll just keep on pushing more money at it and arresting more people, and maybe that will solve the problem. And that's what kind of loop we've got ourselves into. It looks like we're about to take a break here, so let's go ahead and get to our first commercial break.
Okay. Not commercial break.
Non-commercial break.
It's time to play Name That Drug by its side effects.
Unexplained rapid weight gain, trouble breathing, unusual fatigue, fast pounding heartbeat, changes in menstrual cycles, dark urine, persistent nausea, vomiting, chills, cold sweat, dizziness, drowsiness, shaking, and confusion, and fruity breath odor.
Time's up. The answer, Avandia for diabetics. Approved by the FDA.
This week in drug war history, October 30th, 1995. President Bill Clinton signs legislation passed by Congress rejecting a U.S. Sentencing Commission move to reduce penalties for crack cocaine offenses to bring them equal with powder cocaine. November 1st, 1968. The UK's Advisory Committee on Drug Dependence releases the Wooten Report, recommending that marijuana possession should not be a criminal offense. November 1st, 2002. Every prosecutor in the United States has sent a letter from the Office of National Drug Control Policy and the National District Attorneys Association, urging them to make prosecution of cannabis crimes a high priority and to fight efforts to ease drug laws. November 2nd, 1951. The Boggs Act nearly quadruples possession for all narcotics offenses and unscientifically lumps marijuana in with narcotic drugs. November 3rd, 2001. The DEA raids the Los Angeles Cannabis Resource Center, a medical marijuana distribution facility, arresting its president, Scott Emler. City officials condemn the raid at a press conference attended by more than 100 center members. This is Steve Nolan for the Drug Truth Network.
Well, first I have to apologize for Bandu for snapping at her about the commercial break, but we don't do commercials.
It's our non-commercial break.
Non-commercial.
Yes, it's our public service announcement.
It's a commercial break.
I wanted to say one other thing while we were still on MDMA. Rick mentioned it's used primarily in post-traumatic stress treatment, but back in the days when it was used widely in psychotherapy, the other thing it was particularly good for was in grief counseling.
Bereavement.
For people who had just found out they had terminal cancer, for instance, a couple of sessions with MDMA and a therapist really let them resolve their situations quite well.
Enjoy the rest of their life then.
Yeah, that may have been its real high success.
Right.
So where are we going now?
Well, you know, as I think we mentioned earlier, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies is trying to become the pharmacy, if not to provide, at least to distribute generic LSD, MDMA, and marijuana. And they're working with Professor Lyle Craker up at UMass, I believe, to allow him
the application in for a license to grow marijuana.
And I think
competition with the government farm at Ole Miss. Yeah.
And I think he delves into that. I don't know what else to say other than he feels stymied. They have put so much effort into this, and NIDA has forestalled them and delayed and lost the paperwork and done everything possible to.
The administrative law judge recommended that the license be approved.
Right.
And NIDA has kept stalling. And we have another caller. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
You got some look.
Hello.
Hello. My daddy over there.
I'm sorry. You must have the wrong number.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. I think we got the indication that he's got that queued up. I haven't had a time to edit it. It was recorded last night, and I had to do the radio shows first. But this is Dr. Rick Doblin, president of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I just came back from California, attended the Normal Conference in Los Angeles. And while I was out there, I'm a medical patient, and I hung with several other medical marijuana patients. There were, products on the market, Keith, high-grade marijuana, and even this trichomes, which required a person to smoke only perhaps a 50th of a gram per day. Does that not kind of... I don't know. Let's just discuss the aspects of marijuana, how it applies to our society.
Well, I've just discussed how much progress we're making with MDMA research. Today we found that we were approved in Switzerland by the Ethics Committee for a study with LSD. Last week, the FDA approved a study for psilocybin for cancer patients with anxiety. There's projects that we have with ibogaine in Canada and Mexico. We're making substantial progress with psychedelics. With marijuana, we're not making any progress at all. And the reason that we're not is that we have to negotiate with the National Institute on Drug Abuse, whose mission is what's bad with marijuana and how can we help treat people with marijuana dependence. They have a monopoly on the supply of marijuana, and their marijuana is the only marijuana that can be used in studies in the United States trying to look at the therapeutic uses of marijuana. We've had 2 protocols approved by the FDA, and NIDA refused to provide the marijuana for it. We've been trying for 4 years to buy 10 grams. 10 grams is less than half an ounce. The government has over a ton of marijuana in stock. We're trying to buy 10 grams, and we've been unable to do it for research with vaporizers. Vaporizers heat marijuana up, but they don't burn it. It's almost to the temperature of burning. The marijuana emits a steam. The steam contains cannabinoids, but no combustion products. Those tend to be the ones that people are most concerned about in terms of the risks of marijuana to the lungs. And the National Institute on Drug Abuse has refused to let us purchase 10 grams. We're not asking to get anything for free from the government. So what we've been able to demonstrate through our sincere efforts to conduct research into marijuana in patients and safer delivery systems is that the current system with the NIDA monopoly fundamentally obstructs medical marijuana research. Now, since there has been no way really for us to go through the FDA process, how are patients supposed to be meeting their medical needs? 12 states have approved medical marijuana laws that permit patients access under a variety of different circumstances with their recommendations of their doctors to have marijuana for their medical needs. That removes state and local law enforcement, but the feds are still able to prosecute people because there is no approval on the federal level for the medical use of marijuana. There's been several cases that have gone to the Supreme Court, Jeff Jones and Angel Raish, both of whom lost in the U.S. Supreme Court. The federal authority has been affirmed. And so we have this pathetic situation, actually, where the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Drug Czar's office, the Bush administration are, on the one hand, blocking research through the FDA, and on the other hand, arresting patients and their caregivers and dispensaries who are trying to meet medical needs in association, in accordance with state laws. So 5 years ago, I recognized that we needed to break the government monopoly. Obviously, 6 years ago, early 2001, I found a professor, Lyle Craker, at UMass Amherst, who is an expert in medicinal plants. He's a senior tenured professor. He can resist political pressure. His job is secure. He's not involved in any way at all with marijuana legalization efforts. His clear and sole interest is in plant medicines and the development of them for a variety of conditions. He personally believes that the science should tell the story about medical marijuana. He's not even convinced that marijuana is a medicine. But he was willing to work with MAPS to try to get a license to grow marijuana, to break the federal monopoly so that we could have our own independent sources of supply, and then we could work with FDA, the agency that is willing to approve medical marijuana research, and then we could get the studies done. DEA, through a whole series of maneuvers, disgraces, lost the application for a year. DEA's policy is delay, delay, delay. They have fear, actually, that marijuana actually does work, and that if we were to do the research, we'd be able to demonstrate that there are medical benefits. So what DEA is trying to do in every way possible is stall. We had to sue them under the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, under the Administrative Procedures Act, arguing unreasonable delay. The court asked the DEA to explain why it took them so long to reply to Professor Craker's application. DEA then rejected the application, and we were able to then sue them in the administrative law judge context in the DEA headquarters under a DEA administrative law judge, Mary Ellen Bittner. In February 12th of this year, we won the case.
I'm going to drop a footnote here before we get into it. He mentioned at the beginning of this that he also had a study approved for psilocybin. For those that don't know, that's the active ingredient in the so-called magical mushrooms or shrooms.
It grows in every cow pie in the pasture. And yet they want to ban that somehow. Yeah.
Well, it is Schedule 1, just like marijuana and MDMA and LSD.
Right. And I remember when the MDMA first came out, I, at the time, was doing LSD, and I thought it was just too piddling to mess with. I didn't think it was of sufficient strength to even take.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Well, good evening. I am enjoying this program so much, and I hate to take you off where you're at right now, but I am so exasperated by the current situation today that is a sort of an overview of the whole thing. It seems like the police state is not coming. The police state is here. And truth has nothing to do with the issue. And I see you guys struggling with truth and sense and the best needs of the human population, you know. But that's not what's going on here. The police state is here, and how do we deal with such a problem as that?
Thank you.
An excellent caller.
Yeah. Thank you for the compliment.
I think I would like to respond to him first by speaking up, by recognizing and working to change it. We have all become too much sheep, I think, too much go along to get along, and we need to stand up as citizens, do our part, let these politicians know that we recognize what's in front of our eyes.
And this show, we're taking it kind of easy, this show. We're speaking a little bit lightheartedly, giving a little bit of information, but usually we do talk about how many people are being jailed. We're the biggest policed country
in the world.
In the world. We have a higher jail population than anyone else. Houston has a huge overcrowding problem, and yet nothing's being done about it, even though something can. So.
I picked up a new book today that I haven't had a chance to read yet. It's Molly Ivan's posthumous work, Our Bill of Wrongs.
I love Molly.
She was so fabulous.
Amazing.
But the police and the government have been totally out of line in a number of ways. But remember, you're the boss, you're the one that has the vote, and before you vote, you're the one that has the telephone, the email, and the pen and paper to tell those guys in Washington and Austin you're mad as hell and you're not going to take it anymore. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. I have a question. As far as the research for medical marijuana for glaucoma, I've had glaucoma for about 6 years in one eye, and I take 2 different kinds of drops, Cosop and then another drop. And I was curious, what research has been done? As my eye doctor said, the medication that she's given me is pretty much the strongest that they have, and it's becoming immune to it. And the question is, what research has been done as far as for medical marijuana for patients with people with glaucoma? Because without the eye drops, I mean, it's the pressure builds up, and I have a serious pain in the eye, and the medication is no longer working.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I sympathize with your condition. Unfortunately, none of us are medically trained.
Right, we can't evaluate
I do know that marijuana has been found at least partially effective in some forms of glaucoma. Going back at least 30 to 40 years, there have been studies and case studies published on it. I suspect if you go to some of the medical marijuana sites on the web, you'll be able to get much more detailed information than we can give you. And I think I kind of want to ask you a question. Have you asked your own doctor directly about it? And even if he doesn't know anything, you might ask him to find out what he can find out.
I'd like to relay something. A couple of weeks back again was in L.A. at the Normal Conference, and this lady, Elvie Musica, she's one of 5 people in America who is supplied on a monthly basis with a big tin, cookie tin size container.
Joints.
300 joints provided by the U.S. government, grown in Mississippi and shipped to her on a monthly basis. She has glaucoma. She has lost the sight mostly in one eye. The other is still hanging on. This is her main medicine. She has been studied by the University of Missoula, Montana. I believe it was Dr. Ethan Russo.
He's followed up on all of the federal patients.
Yes, he studied all the 5 remaining, well, there were 7 at that time. There are only 5 left. These people were certified as in need of medical marijuana for their ailments, and Elvie had glaucoma. She still swears by the marijuana. That's about all I can tell you. I would imagine there are various circumstances, various types of glaucoma, and you should proceed with your doctor's advice.
We have another caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, my name's Carl, and I was recently diagnosed.
Can you turn your television down, please, Carl?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's echoing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about
That's
this.
fine.
I'm on
That's
cell phone.
Okay, go ahead, yeah.
But anyway, I was recently diagnosed with lung cancer.
Yes.
And I know for my aches and pains with the chemo, the only thing that helps is marijuana. Why can't we go on ahead and get the government to go on ahead and open up the research?
You know, that's the very question we keep asking.
Well, the government's somewhat opening up the research, but it's so hard to get through. Donald Abrams of UCSF is doing some studies, but the real problem is, especially in Texas, the guy about glaucoma, the guy about lung cancer, they can't legally be prescribed it. So what does it take? It takes us pushing those politicians and pushing those legislators and letting them know how they feel.
And the real problem is that if we look at California, which has probably gone further than any other state in making marijuana available medically, what they're finding is that because of the federal law, they don't have any decent way to grow, prepare, or get the product to the patients.
Right. It's still dependent on the black market, still depending on those inflated prices which the black market requires.
Yeah. I still say from all of the analysis I've done that you should be able to go buy good quality marijuana for $1 an ounce.
Seems reasonable to me.
Well, they're still having raids on dispensaries, unfortunately, and even from the debates last night. Yeah.
And cities in California are using zoning laws to keep dispensaries out because of the problems with crime, because it's still black market, and because of problems with the feds.
Right.
Now,
but in Los Angeles, they have some 300 plus clubs in that town
that are functioning.
They have major magazines with full-page ads describing the types of marijuana and their prices. They're not hiding from the feds.
The disgusting thing is apparently the latest tactic the feds have been using is to raid the clubs and dispensaries, confiscate the marijuana, confiscate any cash they find, but then never bring any criminal charges against people so that there's no way to even get it to court.
Well, I see we're wrapping up here, and I want to kind of share something with you. The night I arrived in Los Angeles, I got word that the DEA was busting a dispensary in Los Angeles. I jumped in a taxi, told him to take me there. I took my cameras. I captured the protest, the phalanx of LAPD guarding the DEA while they stole the money and the marijuana, threw it in their station wagon, and drove off hurriedly. I went into the facility. I filmed the damage, the empty cash register, the wreckage from this raid. There was enough marijuana laying on the floor of this establishment that as soon as the cops drove away, they immediately began selling marijuana again. No one was arrested. There were no charges levied. And if I may share that with your audience, you can see this by going to youtube.com/FDBecker, and it's one of the top videos listed there. I do 9 radio shows each week about the harms of the drug war. You can hear those by tuning into KPFT Radio. That's 90.1 FM. And you can learn about all of this gathering of information by going to my website, which is drugtruth.net. That's the Drug Truth Network, drugtruth.net. Thank you for this opportunity to share with our thoughts.
We're always glad to have you with us, Dean. I think the thing I want to point out is it's time for the citizens to get control of their government. It's just totally run amok from the president down to the local sheriff. It's time to say we're not going to take it anymore.
Yeah, thank you so much. And join us 2 weeks from now. We are going to have another guest who will be able to speak about medical marijuana as well. Dean's show is one of the best and easiest ways to keep up with drug policy reform, other than watching us, of course. And you can find him on 90.1 KPFT. We'll be back on again. Season has started November 14th at 8:30. And join us next week.
Might also add that some of our shows, past shows, are now available on the net. Simply go to the Drug Policy Forum of Texas website, dpft.org. Look for the link to Drugs, Crime, and Politics, and there's a list of several of the shows you can check. So, happy Halloween. I hope we've scared you enough to get out and do something to your own politicians. Only by getting them in line can we accomplish anything. Thank you, and scary good night.